Welcome, beautiful Sigma ladies. Some women wait for the right man. Others become so complete the right man starts questioning if he even exists. Now pause. Let that sink in. Because we're not talking about the average woman, the soft-glow romantic, or the just-waiting-on-love daydreamer. We're talking about the Sigma female. That rare psychological outlier who doesn't orbit around love stories, validation, or social timelines. Here's something you probably didn't know. Studies show that people who spend prolonged time in solitude without feeling lonely are neurologically wired differently. More self-regulated, more resistant to external influence, and more attuned to their internal compass. Sound familiar? For the Sigma female, being single isn't a season. It's a stage of evolution. And the longer she's in it, the more dangerous, no, scratch that, the more untouchably extraordinary she becomes. While others panic over timelines, she's out here becoming the final boss of emotional independence. And the real twist? The more time passes, the more she begins to realize maybe she's not hard to love. Maybe she's just impossible to fool. So buckle up. This isn't about romance. This is about what happens when a woman goes so far inward, she becomes a universe no one can colonize. Let's talk about why the longer a Sigma female is single, the more. Number 1. The more she detects fake intimacy like a predator. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the sharper her instincts become. She doesn't just hear what people say, she reads the silences between their words, and when it comes to fake intimacy, she can smell it a mile away. That performative vulnerability that's all over social media and modern dating, it doesn't move her, it repels her. She's been alone long enough to know what real connection feels like, and she's not desperate enough to settle for anything less. So when someone tries to get close with exaggerated emotional sharing or overly deep confessions way too early, she doesn't swoon. She clocks it as a red flag. Because she's learned something most people never figure out. Not everyone who shares their wounds is being honest. Some are just rehearsing them to gain control. She's not cold. She just doesn't confuse intensity with sincerity. Fake intimacy often shows up as forced eye contact, quick emotional bonding, love bombing, or dropping trauma like it's a shortcut to closeness. To most, that looks like depth. To her, it screams performance. And here's what makes her different. She doesn't confront or argue. She just mentally exits the room while still sitting in it. Her face stays neutral, but her mind has already decided. You can't win her over with dramatic stories or exaggerated openness. If it feels rehearsed, strategic, or overly convenient, she detaches. Not out of fear, out of clarity. Being alone has taught her how to connect with herself without performance. So when someone tries to mimic that level of intimacy without actually having done the inner work, she spots the disconnect instantly. It's not impressive, it's exhausting. And the deeper truth is, most people aren't used to someone who sees through them without saying a word. But she does. And that's why fake intimacy doesn't stand a chance. Number 2, the more she realizes her singleness is not a lack. It's an upgrade. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more she stops seeing it as a waiting room and starts recognizing it as an upgrade. She doesn't walk around with the mindset that something's missing. She doesn't think of her life as being on pause until a partner shows up. In fact, the more time passes, the more she realizes that most people in relationships aren't fulfilled. They're just distracted. And that changes everything. She's not avoiding love. She just refuses to settle for the kind of connection that feels more like obligation than alignment. While everyone else is chasing labels, anniversaries, and aesthetic couples photos, she's building something stronger. Peace. That deep, unshakable kind that can't be faked or borrowed from someone else. Being single for this long has sharpened her awareness. She's seen what love looks like when it's rushed. She's watched people lose themselves in relationships just to avoid being alone, and she knows how much damage that does. So now, when she meets someone, her question isn't, do they like me? It's, does this feel freer than my solitude? If the answer is no, she doesn't flinch. She moves on. She understands that singleness isn't a flaw to fix, it's a filter. It reveals who you are without anyone else's influence. It teaches her to enjoy her own company so much that a partner has to bring more than just attraction or attention. They have to bring clarity, depth, and alignment. That's rare. Most people think the longer you're single, the more desperate you become. For her, it's the opposite. The longer she's single, the more selective she becomes. Not because she's afraid of love, but because she's finally tasted a version of life where she doesn't need it to feel whole. And once she gets to that point, no half-baked connection stands a chance. Number 3. The more her focus turns toward legacy, not romance. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more her energy shifts from romantic ideals to lasting impact. She stops thinking in terms of couple goals and starts thinking in terms of legacy. What she's here to build, change, and leave behind. Romance doesn't disappear. It just gets downgraded from the main plot to a side character. It's no longer the mission. It's an optional scene. While others are chasing soulmates, she's chasing meaning. Her goals stretch beyond shared dinners and matching outfits. She wants her name to stand for something, a movement, a masterpiece, a shift in the culture. That's what starts to light her up. And it's not some fake, independent woman show. It's a genuine shift in consciousness. She realizes that the clock she's really racing isn't about finding someone. It's about becoming someone unforgettable. She starts pouring into things most people overlook: ideas, purpose, creation, contribution. Her thoughts expand. Her vision widens. She stops craving comfort and starts chasing challenge. That's what makes her come alive. And slowly, the idea of building a life centered around another person starts to feel limiting. It's not that she can't love. It's that her definition of love matures. She starts to crave a partner who adds momentum to her mission, not someone who slows it down or becomes the mission itself. And if that person doesn't show up, she doesn't spiral. She doubles down on what she's here to do, because that never ghosts her. The more time she spends outside the romantic narrative, the more she sees how many women waste their fire trying to fit into someone else's dream. She refuses to do that. If love comes, it must orbit her purpose, not eclipse it. And if it doesn't, she still wins. Because her story was never about being chosen. It was always about choosing what she came here to create. Number 4. The more she prefers the wilderness over the spotlight. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more she drifts away from the spotlight, not out of fear, but out of freedom. She loses interest in being watched, praised, or chosen, not because she's bitter, and not because she feels unworthy, but because she's simply over it. The clapping, the attention, the performance. It starts to feel hollow. She doesn't need the audience anymore, because her worth isn't up for review. She begins to crave solitude over visibility, peace over praise, depth over display. While others scramble to be seen, she finds power in being unknown, unbothered, and untouched by public opinion. The world may obsess over being relevant, but she's far more interested in being real. That's what the wilderness gives her: space to grow without noise, without mirrors, without masks. In the spotlight, people perform. In the wilderness, she evolves. Validation becomes internal. She doesn't need to be liked. She needs to feel aligned with her values, her path, her truth. She walks away from spaces where she has to shrink or exaggerate to be accepted. She no longer curates herself for attention. She doesn't post to prove anything. She doesn't dress to attract anyone. She's not signaling. She's simply being. The longer she stays single, the more she understands that being seen isn't the same as being understood. And being admired isn't the same as being respected. She's not hungry for recognition anymore. She's hungry for integrity. And most of that work doesn't happen on stages or screens. It happens in the quiet, away from the noise where no one's watching. She starts to thrive in the wilderness, that untamed space where there are no filters, no roles to play, no one to impress, just her instincts, and her path. That's where she becomes dangerous, not in how loudly she roars, but in how silently she rises. Number 5. The more she resists the myth of completion, through a partner. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more she starts to actively reject one of the most widespread lies she's ever been told: that she needs someone else to complete her. That idea doesn't just sound outdated to her, it sounds offensive. The phrase better half makes her cringe. Half of what? She's never seen herself as incomplete. And the longer she walks alone, the more she realizes how much damage that mindset causes. She's not looking for someone to fill a void. She's not hunting for a missing puzzle piece. She's already whole. Flaws, fire, complexity, and all. And because of that, she's not drawn to people who want to fix her, rescue her, or merge into some blurred version of us. She wants someone who stands strong on their own, not someone who sees partnership as an identity upgrade. She's learned that connection without individuality is just codependence with prettier branding, and she won't participate in that. The longer she's single, the more she sees how many people are just afraid of their own solitude, trying to escape themselves by blending into someone else. That's not love, that's avoidance. When she does think about partnership, it's not about merging, it's about alignment. She wants a whole person with their own path, their own thoughts, and the emotional maturity to walk beside her, not cling to her. And if that kind of connection never shows up, she doesn't see it as a loss. She sees it as a filter doing its job. Completion, to her, isn't found in someone's arms. It's found in living fully, choosing consciously, and never abandoning herself to be chosen by someone else. That's her new standard. And once she locks into that, she's not just hard to impress. Number 6. The more her intuition becomes lethally accurate. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the sharper her intuition becomes. And not in a soft, mystical way, but in a brutally precise, almost forensic sense. Solitude tunes her frequency. Without constant emotional noise from others, she becomes hyper-aware of her inner signals. What used to be a vague gut feeling turns into a high-resolution scan. She doesn't just sense energy, she decodes it. She doesn't need long conversations or background checks. One sentence, one glance, one hesitation in someone's tone, and she already knows. She picks up on what's not being said. She catches contradictions others miss. While people try to charm her, impress her, or manipulate her, she's already 10 steps ahead, calmly watching, internally dissecting every move they make. This isn't paranoia, it's pattern recognition. She's seen enough, felt enough, been disappointed enough to build a database of red flags most people don't even register. And the key difference, she trusts it. Where others might doubt their instincts, she treats hers like data. If something feels off, it is off. She doesn't wait for proof to act. She moves before the fallout even begins. She's not reactive. She's surgical. If your story doesn't align with your energy, if your confidence feels performed, if your vulnerability is weaponized, she won't argue. She'll just disappear. No warnings, no drama, just gone. The longer she's alone, the more fine-tuned this becomes. Because she's spent so much time with her own thoughts, emotions, and contradictions, she's developed an internal lie detector most people will never understand. She knows when she's in alignment, and she knows the second someone pulls her out of it. And anyone who tries to gaslight her into doubting herself is met with silence, the kind that speaks louder than confrontation. Her intuition isn't just strong, it's lethal, not to others, but to illusion. And once it's sharpened to that level, deception has nowhere left to hide. Number 7. The more she becomes immune to manipulation. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more mentally untouchable she becomes, especially when it comes to manipulation. With no one in her ear trying to steer her emotions, no romantic partner subtly bending her self-perception, she begins to see power plays for what they really are. Emotional choreography dressed up as connection, and she doesn't just notice them, she dismantles them before they even have a chance to breathe. She's not bitter or guarded, she's just studied the game from the outside where it's easier to see the mechanics. She's watched how people use guilt as a leash, how silence gets weaponized, how fake concern becomes control. And while others are still second-guessing themselves, she's already stripped the tactic down to its blueprint and quietly exited the room. She becomes immune, not because she's hardened, but because she's clear. Clarity is her defense. She doesn't get caught in drama spirals or emotional baiting. Love bombing doesn't move her. Passive aggression doesn't confuse her. Gaslighting doesn't make her question her memory. It makes her question your integrity. She doesn't argue to prove her point. She doesn't over-explain. She's learned that real power lies in not reacting, that silence is a strategy, that watching someone reveal their own hand is more useful than trying to correct their behavior. And because she doesn't need anything from anyone, not validation, not attention, not approval, she's untouchable in ways manipulators hate. Emotional games stop working on her because she no longer plays. She doesn't chase closure, demand apologies, or try to win people over. Her self-worth isn't a debate, it's already settled. And when manipulation tries to find a crack in her armor, it finds only mirrors. She doesn't fight power moves. She erases their power entirely. Number 8. The more she rewrites what love means. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more she rewrites the entire concept of love for herself. She watches as everyone else clings tightly to the cultural scripts, the romantic movies, the social media fairy tales, the checklist of what love should look like. But those versions don't fit her. They feel hollow, performative, or outright suffocating. So she throws them out and builds her own definition from the ground up. Her version of love isn't about flowers, grand gestures, or social proof. It's not about status updates or Instagram captions. Instead, love becomes a deeply personal, fiercely honest experience, something that demands clarity, respect, and freedom. She values love that challenges her intellectually and emotionally, that pushes her to grow rather than settle. It's less about how much you say, "I love you," and more about how much you're willing to show up in your rawest, most unfiltered form. This new definition terrifies people who depend on superficial validation, those who want love to be easy, neat, and socially acceptable. Because real love, by her standards, isn't comfortable or convenient. It's disruptive. It questions old wounds and patterns. It demands accountability and vulnerability, but on her terms. It's not a refuge from loneliness, but a partnership between two whole, complex people who refuse to dim their light for each other. She's not interested in love as an escape or a crutch. She wants it as a force that elevates her purpose and sharpens her edges. This redefined love scares many because it refuses to be commodified or controlled. It's raw, wild, and unapologetically real, just like her. And the longer she's single, the clearer it becomes. Love isn't a destination or a goal. It's a living, evolving agreement between equals, and anything less simply doesn't deserve her time. Number 9. The more her standards become psychological, not superficial. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more her standards shift from surface-level things to the deep, invisible architecture of a person's mind and heart. The flashy stuff, looks, social status, charm, fades into white noise. It doesn't move her or catch her attention anymore. What grabs her focus now are things you can't fake or dress up, patterns of behavior, emotional fluency, intellectual consistency. She's learned that anyone can put on a show for a few hours, dress sharp, say the right words, flash a smile. But real connection isn't about a performance. It's about what's steady underneath. Does this person handle stress without flipping out? Do they talk about their feelings without turning them into a mess of blame? Are they curious, open-minded, and willing to wrestle with their own contradictions? Those are the questions she asks, often without speaking them aloud. If your soul feels fractured, scattered, or just plain messy, if your thoughts and actions don't line up, if you switch between versions of yourself like a bad radio signal, she won't waste time trying to decode you. You become invisible to her because incoherence is the ultimate deal breaker. She doesn't need perfection. She needs integrity, the kind that runs deep, steady, and true. Her standards have become psychological because she's spent so much time alone with her own complexity. She's done the work on herself and expects the same in return. It's not about being judgmental, it's about survival, protecting her energy from anyone who can't hold their own inner world together. In a sea of surface-level attraction, she's searching for the undercurrent, the quiet strength that holds everything else up. And if you don't have that, no matter how good you look or how charming you act, she won't see you. Number 10. The more she becomes intolerant of noise, literal and emotional. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more intolerant she becomes of noise, both the literal kind and the emotional kind. It's not just about preferring quiet rooms or peaceful environments, though that's certainly part of it. It's about how every unnecessary sound, every forced conversation, and every fake display of emotion starts to grate on her like nails on a chalkboard. She no longer has patience for the clutter that fills most social interactions. Small talk? She finds it exhausting, not because she's antisocial, but because she's painfully aware of how much of it is just empty noise, words that fill space without meaning. People often use small talk as a social lubricant to avoid real connection or difficult truths. But to her, it's a waste of energy and time. She'd rather sit in silence than engage in conversations that don't feed her mind or soul. Silence, to her, isn't awkward. It's sacred. It's a sign of comfort and respect, not emptiness. Then there's performative empathy. Those hollow displays of concern or vulnerability meant more to impress or manipulate than to genuinely connect. The longer she's alone, the more she can spot when someone is putting on a show emotionally. She's not fooled by fake tears or exaggerated stories designed to elicit pity or approval. Those moments used to draw her in, but now they just make her step back. She values authenticity over theatrics, honesty over manipulation. The kind of empathy that's real is quiet, consistent, and steady, not loud and demanding. Her threshold for inauthenticity plummets because she's learned what real connection feels like. It's rare, but it's unmistakable. She'd rather have one meaningful conversation than 100 meaningless ones. She doesn't need constant noise to feel alive or validated. Instead, she craves depth, substance, and clarity. This intolerance for noise extends beyond social interactions. It's emotional clutter, mental chaos, and any energy that distracts her from her path. She's become a connoisseur of calm, and she protects that calm fiercely. The longer she's single, the more she realizes that her peace is non-negotiable. She'd rather dine alone in complete silence than waste her breath and her energy on hollow interactions that drain rather than nourish her. In short, her silence is a shield, a sanctuary, and a statement. She doesn't settle for noise in any form. Number 11. The more she becomes attracted to the impossible. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more impossible it becomes to impress her with anything ordinary. Conventional charm, too predictable. Surface-level confidence, transparent. Handsome with no depth, she's already forgotten your name. What used to turn heads doesn't even turn her head anymore. The predictable scripts that once passed as chemistry now read like pre-rehearsed lines. She's evolved beyond the basics. And so have her attractions. Her interest begins shifting toward the rare, the paradoxical, the mentally dangerous, not in a toxic sense, but in a way that stirs her mind awake. She's drawn to the kind of men who live on the fringes of normal, whose thoughts move in directions that don't follow the usual path. Creators, thinkers, rule breakers, not because they're flashy or rebellious, but because they challenge her, not emotionally, but intellectually, spiritually, existentially. She wants someone who can break open reality and build new frameworks with her. Someone who doesn't just repeat popular opinions but questions them with nuance. Someone who isn't trying to win her, but who's too busy building something extraordinary to bother with games. And even then, she won't be impressed unless there's coherence between their words and their energy. She's not seeking perfection. She's seeking alignment with the wildly original. This craving for the impossible isn't rooted in arrogance. It's the inevitable result of her growth. Once you've tasted your own freedom, felt the fullness of your inner world, and built a life that doesn't require rescue or attention, basic is intolerable. You don't want someone to carry you off into the sunset. You want someone who can walk with you through dimensions most people are too afraid to enter. She's attracted to contradiction. Thinkers who are intense but soft, grounded yet imaginative, analytical but poetic. People who can hold dualities and stay present in complexity, because that's how she lives now, at the edge of what's possible, always reaching beyond the obvious. And so the more she evolves, the more she needs something rare, not in possessions or status, but in consciousness. If you can't challenge her mind or provoke her soul, you'll never even make it onto her radar. Number 12. The more she questions whether romantic connection is even necessary. The longer a Sigma female stays single, the more she begins to quietly, calmly question something most people never dare to. Is romantic connection even necessary? not in a dramatic or jaded tone, not from heartbreak, but from sheer clarity, from observing her life without it and realizing she's not just surviving, she's thriving. She doesn't hate love, she's not bitter, but she's no longer under the spell that romantic pair bonding is a requirement for a fulfilled life. The emotional noise around finding your person starts to fade, the pressure loses its grip, and what's left is a brutally honest realization. The world doesn't fall apart without romance. Her soul doesn't wither, her path doesn't stall, in fact it often expands. She sees the machinery behind the obsession with couplehood, the marketing, the movies, the social programming. It all starts to look like a story designed to keep people dependent, distracted, and easily defined. But she's harder to define now. She's moved past the waiting to be loved phase. She doesn't need to be mirrored to feel real. Her life has its own rhythm, its own depth, its own intimate rituals, and none of it requires a romantic partner to be complete. When she does reflect on love, it's with clear-eyed discernment. Does this actually add value? Or is it just noise wrapped in hormones and habits? Does this relationship elevate both people? Or is it just another attempt to avoid loneliness? She doesn't ask these questions because she's guarded. She asks them because she's awake. She's seen too many people shrink themselves for the sake of being partnered. That's not her path. So while others chase connection like oxygen, she treats it like art. Beautiful if it's real, but absolutely non-essential. And if it never comes, she won't break, she won't settle, she won't feel incomplete. She'll keep walking, whole, sovereign, and deeply in love with a life that doesn't need a co-star to be extraordinary. The longer a Sigma female remains single, the more she transcends the conventional narratives that try to define her worth through romantic involvement. Singleness is no longer a placeholder or a failure to fill a void, but a deliberate, powerful choice, an intense period of self-discovery and self-actualization that reshapes her from the inside out. In this solitude, her intuition sharpens into a weapon of truth, allowing her to see people and situations with brutal clarity and unmatched precision. She becomes immune to manipulation because she no longer depends on others for validation or emotional security, creating an unshakable fortress of self-worth. Her standards evolve beyond the superficial. Looks, charm, and status fall away like dead leaves, while emotional fluency, intellectual integrity, and psychological coherence become the pillars she demands in any connection. This psychological sophistication isn't a gatekeeping mechanism, but a natural consequence of deep self-work and the refusal to settle for anything less than genuine. She learns to identify and dismantle hollow interactions, to resist the noise of performative empathy and meaningless small talk, choosing silence and authenticity over any interaction that lacks depth. More than that, she rewrites what love means on her own terms, building a definition that terrifies those who rely on conventional, often shallow, ideas of romance. Her love is not about completion through another person, but about mutual elevation, respect, and freedom. It's a force that demands honesty, growth, and alignment, rather than comfort or escape. This redefinition reflects a profound inner transformation, from seeking external validation to cultivating an inner legacy and impact that outlasts fleeting relationships. In this rarefied space of intentional singleness, she shifts her focus from romance to legacy, from being seen to being aligned, from chasing us to obsessing over impact. Her journey is not about loneliness, but about becoming whole and powerful on her own terms. The longer she stays single, the more she embraces her true nature, unapologetically independent, fiercely self-aware, and relentlessly authentic. And in doing so, she becomes not just someone who can thrive alone, but someone who refuses to settle for anything less than extraordinary, in herself, in love, and in life. If you found these insights into the Sigma female's journey as fascinating and powerful as I do, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a deep dive like this. Drop a like if this spoke to you or challenged the way you think. Your support helps us bring more exceptional content your way, and I want to hear from you. What's your experience with embracing independence and rewriting the rules? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your voice matters here. Finally, If you know someone who needs to hear this, share the video with them. Let's build a community that celebrates authenticity, strength, and radical self-awareness together. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.